She simply wasn't bred for this level of society. Hal sick. My mother-in-law's voice, sharp as ice, cut through the silent ballroom. 100 pairs of elite Bostonian eyes turned to stare directly at me. The sound of their judgment was deafening. My husband, David, stood stiffly beside me. His hand was a dead weight on the small of my back. I was standing near the fireplace, trying to look like I belonged. I was wearing a simple black dress that had cost more than my first car. But in this room, it looked like a bargain bin rag. Eleanor Warren, my mother-in-law, continued her Christmas Eve toast. She was a vision of old money elegance, holding her champagne flute like a scepter. Tradition, she said. Her gaze locked on me, is the bedrock of families like ours. It's about lineage. She wanted them all to see me as a poor, gold-digging lawyer, the Cinderella from Pittsburgh who had tricked her way into their family. It's about knowing where you come from. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. My pulse was loud in my ears. David gave my back a weak, apologetic squeeze but did nothing. He never did anything. Eleanor smiled. A thin, cruel line. It must be quite overwhelming, she said with delicate, false sympathy. To come from nothing and find yourself among greatness. She thought I would swallow the humiliation and stay silent. She thought I was just a useless lawyer who would take it. She had no idea. She had no idea that just 3 months ago, this poorly bred lawyer was the only reason her golden boy son wasn't in a state prison for a felony DUI and drug charge. She had no idea that I secretly saved him, and saved their precious family name. Tonight, she finally pushed me too far. She raised her glass high, to the Warrens, and to knowing your place. The room echoed with polite hears and the clinking of glasses. My eyes blurred. I wanted to run. I wanted to cry. But as I stood there, humiliated, a different feeling began to burn through the shame. It was a cold, quiet anger. It was the feeling I got right before a trial, right before I eviscerated a hostile witness on the stand. Eleanor Warren thought she had just delivered the final, humiliating blow. Tonight, I was going to use that secret to destroy her in front of everyone. To understand the Warrens, you have to understand their Boston. It wasn't the Boston of the Red Sox. It was the Boston of private clubs I couldn't enter, of last names that were also the names of university libraries, of money so old it was practically fossilized. The Warren name was on hospital wings, Museum Plaques, and the board of every major financial institution in the city. Charles Warren Sr., my father-in-law, was Boston business, and Eleanor's full-time job was being Mrs. Charles Warren. Her currency was status. Her fortress was this very house on Beacon Hill. And then there was me, Jessica Riley. I grew up in Pittsburgh. My dad worked at the U.S. steel plant for 40 years. My mom was a public school teacher. We weren't poorly bred. As Eleanor's toast implied, we were everything else. We were potluck dinners, Friday night high school football, and a deep, unshakable belief that you earned what you got. I met David at Georgetown Law. He was charming, funny, and, I thought, refreshingly normal. I didn't realize his family's prep was owning the entire prep school. I was at Georgetown on a full-ride academic scholarship. I was graduating summa cum laude. I was, by any objective measure, successful, but not by the Warren measure. I'll never forget the first time David took me home to meet them. It was for this same Christmas party. 4 years ago, I wore a red crew dress I had saved up for, thinking I looked festive. Eleanor had looked me up and down, given a faint, tight smile, and said, "How utilitarian." Dear. Later that night, I overheard her telling her sister that David's little project was sweet, but he'd get it out of his system before he proposed to a cabot or a lodge. When David did propose, I said yes because I loved him. I was naive. I thought love would be enough. I thought my intelligence and my accomplishments would, eventually, win them over. I was wrong. For 3 years, I had endured it. The helpful comments about my wardrobe, the forgetting to include me in family photos, the casual questions from Charles Sr. at dinner. Like, "A ver," you said. Tell me, Jessica, what does a public defender actually do? Is it just plea deals for drug addicts? They didn't understand my work. I wasn't a corporate lawyer like the ones in their family firm. Prescott, Hale. I didn't spend my days drafting mergers. I was a trial attorney. I specialized in high-stakes criminal defense. I represented people sometimes good, sometimes terrible, who were in the worst trouble of their lives. I spent my days in courtrooms, in precincts, in holding cells. I knew how to talk to cops, how to reason with DAs, and how to spot a lie from 100 yards away. My work was gritty. It was real. And to the Warrens, it was positively filthy. They didn't see me as a skilled professional. They saw me as the Cinderella who had gotten an invitation to a ball she didn't understand. And they were all just waiting for the clock to strike midnight. The clock had struck midnight. Just not for me. It struck 3 months ago. On a rainy Tuesday in October. I was asleep. It was 2:34 in the morning. According to the red glow of my alarm clock, my phone buzzed. A text. I groggily reached for it, expecting it to be David, who was on a business trip with his father. It wasn't David. The name on the screen made my blood run cold. Chip Warren. Chip was Charles Warren Jr., David's younger brother, the golden boy, the one who had gone to Harvard, the one who was in training to take over the family's financial empire, the one who was, in my private opinion, an arrogant, irresponsible, and deeply stupid young man. I had never received a text from Chip in my life. The message read, "Jess, I need help. I messed up. I messed up, BAD. Cops. PLS, help me. Don't call Dad." My professional instincts kicked in. Shoving aside my sleepiness, I texted back 2 words. "Where are you?" The reply was a dropped pin, a Boston police precinct in the North End. I typed again. "Have you said anything?" "No. I asked for a lawyer. They think I'm calling my dad's lawyer. I called you. Don't say one more word. To anyone. I'm on my way." I was dressed and out of the house in less than 3 minutes. As I drove my sensible sedan through the slick, empty streets of Boston, my mind was racing. Chip was the family prince. Any trouble he got into was usually handled by the astronomically expensive lawyers at Prescott and Hale. They would send a senior partner to smooth things over with a quiet word and a fat check. Why call me? The answer hit me like a physical blow. Because whatever he had done, it wasn't a smooth-it-over problem. It was a me problem. It was a real grittu, talking to cops at 3 in the morning problem. He was scared. And in that moment, he didn't call the family's high-priced corporate shields. He called the one lawyer in the family who actually knew her way around a booking desk. When I got to the precinct, it was worse than I'd imagined. The desk sergeant, a guy named Rafferty whom I'd crossed paths with on a case a year prior, just looked at me and shook his head. "Your family. Counselor. In-laws," I said, flashing my bar card. "Where is he?" They had him in an interrogation room. I walked in. Chip was a mess. His polo shirt was torn. He had a cut over his eye. And he reeked of alcohol. "Jess," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Thank God." "Shut up." Chip, I said. All business. Don't say another word until I come back. I went to talk to the arresting officer. It took me 20 minutes to get the full picture. Chip had been driving his brand new Porsche Cayenne down Storrow Drive, going well over 80. According to the report, he had sideswiped one car, lost control, and slammed into a concrete divider. The real problem, his breathalyzer. The legal limit in Massachusetts is 0.08. Chip had blown a 1.94. Over twice the legal limit. A mandatory night in jail. And then, the kicker. He was arrogant about it. The officer told me, sipping his burnt coffee, telling me, "Do you know who I am?" The whole 9 yards. So, we decided to do a thorough inventory of the vehicle before we towed it. And I asked, my stomach tightening. "And," the officer said, smiling, "we found this in the center console." He held up an evidence bag. Inside was a small, plastic baggie containing about 5 grams of a fine white powder. Cocaine. My heart stopped. This wasn't a simple DUI. This was a DUI with aggravating factors, plus felony possession. This wasn't a lose-your-license problem. This was a 5 to 10 years in prison problem. This was a front page of the Boston Globe problem. This was a destroy the Warren family reputation problem. "He's toast," the cop said. "DA's gonna have a field day with this." I took a deep breath. Okay. I spent the next 4 hours in that precinct. I didn't call David. I didn't call Charles Sr. I called in every favor I had. I talked to the night shift DA, an old colleague from my public defender days. I argued illegal search, claiming the inventory wasn't by the book. It was. But I argued it with a straight face. I argued chain of custody issues. At 4:30 in the morning, I cut a deal. It was a masterpiece. I got the felony possession charge dropped. Completely. In exchange, Chip would plead guilty not to the DUI but to a lesser charge of reckless driving. He'd pay a massive fine. He'd lose his license for 2 years. And he'd have to complete a 100-hour substance abuse and education program. It was a miracle, and it all had to be filed before the press office opened at 9 a.m., and the arrest logs became public. At 6 in the morning, Apole, shaking Chip Warren, Jr. walked out of the precinct. I drove him back to his multi-million-dollar apartment. He was crying. "Jess, I don't know what to say. You saved my life. I saved your father's business." "Chip," I said coldly, "and I saved your name. Now, here's what you're going to do. You're going to call your father. You're going to tell him you got a bad speeding ticket and that you're hiring Prescott and Hale to handle it. You will never, ever mention the other charge. Do you understand me?" But what about you?" he asked. "This never happened." I said, "I was never there." "Why?" "Because, Chip," I said, pulling up to his building, "your parents would rather die than admit they needed me." He nodded, terrified and grateful. 2 days later, I was at the Warren house for Sunday dinner, when Charles Sr. announced, "We had a small nuisance this week. Young Chip got an overzealous speeding ticket." He raised his wine glass. "But thank heavens for Prescott and Hale. They are handling it with their usual brilliant efficiency." I looked across the table. Chip was staring at his plate, his face white. David was oblivious. And Eleanor just smiled and said, "Of course. Dear, that's what you pay $500,000 a year in retainers for. Quality always recognizes quality." I just sipped my water, and I kept their secret. Until tonight. The polite applause for Eleanor's toast died down. The air in the ballroom was thick with my humiliation. David was still holding my back. his hand now feeling less like a support and more like a cage. I felt that cold, precise anger rise, sharpening my focus. This wasn't a family dinner. This was a courtroom, and Eleanor had just made her opening statement. Now, it was my turn for rebuttal. I gently removed David's hand from my back and took a single step forward. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My trial voice was trained to cut through a noisy courtroom without a microphone. Thank you, Eleanor, I said. The room, which had started to murmur again, fell silent. My voice was calm, clear, and utterly devoid of the shame she expected. That was truly illuminating. I continued. I let my eyes scan the room, meeting the gaze of the other guests. You're absolutely right. Lineage is important. I saw Eleanor's smile tighten. This was not the script. The script was that I was supposed to look down, blush, and hide for the rest of the night. You're also right about competence, I said, taking another slow step toward the grand piano. And you're right that one learns by observing. I turned to my father-in-law, who was watching me with a new, sharp interest. Charles, you of all people understand the value of a good investment. You pay for the best. You demand results. That's enough. Jessica, Charles Sr. said, his voice a low warning. Is it? I asked. I don't think it is. You see, Eleanor, you're right. I did come from nothing. By your standards, my father built things with his hands. My mother taught children how to read. They didn't have a family firm on retainer for... What is it? Charles, over $2 million a year just for Prescott and Hale. David hissed. Jess, stop. I ignored him. I was now in the center of the room, standing right where Eleanor had stood. I had the floor. You pay for quality, I said, my voice ringing. You pay for the best. But I've observed, Eleanor, I've observed that for all that money, for all that quality, your brilliant lawyers at Prescott and Hale seem to miss rather significant details. Eleanor's face was turning a pale, chalky color. What are you talking about? You. Ungrateful. I'm talking. I interrupted, my voice sharp as a scalpel. About competence. I'm talking about October 17th. I saw Chip, by the bar, drop his glass. It shattered on the marble floor. The sound was like a gunshot. I'm talking, I said, my voice dropping. About your golden boy son, Chip, blowing a 1.94 on a breathalyzer. I'm talking about him totaling his $90,000 Porsche. And I'm talking about the 5 grams of cocaine the police found in his center console. You could have heard a snowflake land. The entire room stopped breathing. Eleanor's hand went to her throat. You are lying. Am I? I said. I reached into the small, simple black clutch I was carrying, the one Eleanor had probably thought was hopelessly out of fashion. I pulled out a single, folded piece of paper. This, I said, is a copy of the original arrest report. Number 8, 8219. Arresting Officer Detective Michael Rafferty. A good man. Very thorough. I tapped the paper. He notes. Right here. 1 small badgie. White powder. Presumed cocaine. Not a speeding ticket. Eleanor. A felony. Charles Sr. took an involuntary step forward. His face was gray. But wait, I said. There's more. I reached back into my bag. This, I said, holding up my phone, is my call log from that night, 2:34 a.m., an incoming call from Charles Warren Jr., lasting 7 minutes. followed by me calling my old colleague in the DA's office at 3:15 a.m. Not a call to Prescott and Hale. Not a call to Daddy. A call to me. I looked at Chip. He was as white as the snow outside. Isn't that right? Chip. Chip just stared at me, his mouth open. And then, slowly, he nodded. I turned back to Eleanor. Her perfect, icy composure was gone. She was trembling. "You're brilliant lawyers at Prescott and Hale," I said, with a dismissive laugh. "They filed the paperwork I negotiated. They cashed a $500,000 check for a deal that the girl from nothing cut in a precinct interrogation room while they were all asleep in their Beacon Hill beds. I got the felony possession charge dropped before the sun came up. I got it reduced to a reckless driving charge. I saved your son from prison. I saved your husband's business. I saved your name from the front page of every paper in this city." I walked right up to Eleanor. So close I could smell her expensive, suffocating perfume. "You're right, Eleanor," I whispered. "Some people aren't bred for this. And the person in this room with the competence to save this family was me." I looked around at the stunned faces. "So, you are very, very welcome." The silence that followed was a physical thing. It was heavier and colder than the December night outside. Chip was the first to break it. He didn't speak. He just slumped into a chair, put his head in his hands, and let out a sound that was half sob, half groan. God, she's telling the truth. Mom, she did. She saved me." Eleanor looked at her son, then at her husband, then at me. Her face, which I had only ever seen in a mask of polite disdain, was now a grotesque canvas of pure, unadulterated rage, and beneath that, something worse, humiliation. She had been publicly, surgically, and completely defeated in her own home, in front of her own people. Charles Senior, on the other hand, was not looking at his wife. He was looking at me. His face wasn't angry. It was calculating. The businessman in him was processing the new data. He was reevaluating an asset he had, until this moment, marked as 0. He looked at me, then at the useless, shell-shocked partners from Prescott and Hale in the corner, then back at me. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't an apology. It was acknowledgement. It was respect. David, who had been frozen this whole time, finally came to life. He stepped forward and, in front of everyone, he took my hand. His was trembling, but his grip was firm. "Jess," he whispered, his eyes wide with a mix of horror and, strangely, awe. "Why? Why didn't you tell me?" "It wasn't my secret to tell." "David," I said, my voice suddenly very tired. "It was Chip's. But tonight, your mother made it my business." I looked at Eleanor. She had nothing. No words. No icy comeback. She was, for the first time in her life, silent. "I think we'll be leaving," I said. I squeezed David's hand. "David." He didn't hesitate. "Yes, we're leaving." He didn't even get our coats. We just walked. We walked past the stunned guests. We walked past the wilting Chip. We walked past the frozen statue that was Eleanor Warren. As we reached the massive oak doors, Charles Sr.'s voice cut through the silence. "Jessica." I stopped and turned. He didn't say "I'm sorry." He didn't say "thank you." He just said, "My office, Monday, 9 a.m. I held his gaze for a long moment. Then I just nodded once. "We'll see, Charles." And with that, David and I walked out of the gala. into the cold, clean Boston air. The car ride back to our small apartment in Cambridge was silent for the first 10 minutes. David just drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Finally, he pulled over, slamming the car into park on a quiet, tree-lined street. "Why me?" he burst out, his voice cracking. "Why didn't you tell me I'm your husband?" "And he's your brother," I shot back, the adrenaline of the night finally ebbing, leaving me exhausted. It was his mess. David. He begged me not to tell. And honestly, I said, the words heavy with 3 years of frustration. What would you have done? You would have told your father. Who would have told your mother? Who would have found a way to blame me for the whole thing? That's not. He started, then stopped, because we both knew it was true. She humiliated me. David, I said, my voice softening. For 3 years, tonight was just the end of it. I'm done. I'm done being their Cinderella. I'm done being your project. I'm a damn good lawyer, and it's about time this family, and you, started acting like it. He stared at me, really looked at me, as if for the first time. He didn't see the girl from Pittsburgh. He didn't see the wife his mother hated. He saw the woman who had just stared down the entire Warren dynasty and won. "You're right," he said, his voice quiet. "God. You're right. I'm sorry. Jess, I'm so sorry." He took my hand. It was the first time in a long time I felt like we were on the same side. I did not go to Charles Sr.'s office on Monday. Instead, I spent all of Monday and Tuesday moving my things out of my small office at the public interest firm and into a new, sleek, corner office overlooking the harbor. I had been planning it for 6 months. The encounter at the party didn't give me courage. It just expedited my timeline. On Wednesday, I filed the paperwork for my new firm, Riley and Associates, Strategic Crisis Management. On Thursday, at 9 a.m., my new assistant buzzed me. "Mr. Charles Warren Sr. is here to see you." "Send him in," I said. He walked into my office. The power dynamic, for the first time, was in my favor. He wasn't the patriarch in his ballroom. He was a client in my office. He looked around, impressed. "You move quickly." "It's a requirement of the job," I said, gesturing for him to sit. "Coffee?" "No." "Thank you." He sat, placing his briefcase on his lap. He looked tired. "Eleanor," he began, "is indisposed. She's visiting her sister in Palm Beach for the foreseeable future." "A wise decision," I said, my face neutral. "And Chip," he continued, "is in a 30-day inpatient treatment program in Arizona. No phone. No visitors." "An even wiser decision," I said. He finally looked at me. "You did what an army of lawyers at Prescott and Hale failed to do. You identified a liability. And you handled it." I just told the truth. "Charles," I said. "No," he said, shaking his head. "You played the hand you were dealt. Brilliantly. I respect that. Prescott, Hale. They've grown lazy, comfortable. They sent me a bill for that speeding ticket. For $500,000. He opened his briefcase. He pulled out a thick, leather-bound folder. He slid it across my desk. "We're moving our family's account," he said. "All of it. Personal. Business. The family trust. Everything." I opened the folder. It was a retainer agreement. The number on the bottom line made my eyes widen. It wasn't just 7 figures. It was 8. An annual retainer of $10 million. I looked at him. I let a small, professional smile touch my lips. I closed the folder. My rates are significant. Charles, I said, sliding the folder back toward him, and this number is acceptable. I looked relieved. But, I added. His face tensed. I have conditions. 1. My firm will handle all legal and crisis communications. That means no one, not you, not David, and especially not Eleanor speaks to the press, the police, or anyone else without coming through me first. My word is final. He nodded. Done. 2nd, I don't report to a committee. I report to one person, you, and if you're not available, David. That's it. I will not be managed by your board or your wife. Agreed, he said immediately. And 3rd, I said, leaning forward, you will all start treating my husband, your son, like the partner in this family that he is, and you will all start treating me like the asset that I am. Not the poorly bred girl. Am I clear? Charles Warren Sr., one of the most powerful men in Boston, looked at me for a long time. Then he stood up, and for the first time, he extended his hand. Crystal clear. Counselor, he said. I stood and shook his hand. The grip was firm. The deal was done. Eleanor Warren wanted a daughter-in-law with good breeding. What she got was a lawyer with a good brain. In a city like Boston, they say old money talks. What I learned is that competence shouts. And that night, standing in that ballroom, I finally found my voice. I was no longer the Cinderella they tried to humiliate. I was the lawyer they couldn't afford to lose. I wasn't just at the ball. I now owned the entire castle.